Welcome to the Upshift podcast, where changemakers meet and commune and find out how each other is doing their part in changing the world. And today's guest is Lizbeth of Multiple Mind. And this is going to be very interesting for the listeners this time because she delves into some really deep things, and I can't wait to interview her. So Lizbeth, welcome.
Hi, Angel. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So you're probably going to have to start from ground one with my listeners. Tell us what you do.
Okay. So I am an internal family systems therapy practitioner, and internal family systems therapy is a relatively new model of psychotherapy. And it's based on the fact that we have subpersonalities. We have many parts that make up who we are. And some parts of us carry trauma. Some parts of us are protectors and help us be the best of ourselves in different situations. But often we may feel out of control or reacting to things that have happened in the past. And IFS therapy is about getting in touch with the exiles who carry the burdens of those original painful experiences or trauma, often from our childhood, and using the self energy, who we are at core, our essence, which is full of compassion, to bring healing to those experiences so that we can live life from a place of joy, creativity, playfulness.
First of all, how would you know, just a regular person, how would you know that what was going on that maybe wasn't working for your life? How would they, oh, I need to go see Lizbeth, of that kind of work. Yeah.
I often think that we have a sense of us not living our best selves. So, for example, we might feel that we're being reactionary. Something might be upsetting to us. And these are just indications that something needs some work here. So, for example, if you find yourself getting emotionally activated by a conversation, it may not be that the conversation is itself entirely activating. It could be that it reminds us of something that happened in the past, and then we may have some coping strategy that doesn't necessarily serve us. So then it might be, we call those trailheads. Dick Schwartz, who's the founder of the model, he called these things trailheads, which is like, there's a trail and it's taking you somewhere where you need to go and do some work. And you can use these feelings or behaviors to say, okay, I should explore what's going on here and then really live out like my essence and what it feels like to be authentic me.
Yes. Yeah. And so I guess I wanted to ask some of the triggers. So people have bad days and people have bad reactions, but how do they know A, it's chronic, and B, it's like, hey, this thing keeps happening to me? When do they know that? And when do they say it's time for me to do something? Give me that scenario.
Okay. So I think when we see repeated patterns in our lives that don't work for us, then we might realize that something's going on. So if, for example, every time a particular topic of conversation comes up with a partner, like, are we going to settle down? Is there security in this relationship? You might feel anxious in your body. It might come out in the speed at which you're responding. You might be less mindful or deliberate in your speech. You might find yourself wanting to immerse yourself in social media or anything to distract yourself from the pain or the anxiety or whatever's going on for you. So this is about bringing more mindfulness to the situation so that you can say, what do I really want here? Now, we have many parts inside us, and sometimes they all want what's whole and good for the system, but they may have different ways of getting there. So this is about going inside, listening to what all the different parts of us want, bringing everyone on board, and finding a way forward. So it isn't that, okay, I'm in this difficult conversation, I'm going to emotionally react and, get really angry or something, because that doesn't work for all of us. So it might be that we listen, find out what's going on with that one part, and then bring them into more harmony with other parts. So there isn't just one part taking over and bringing that sort of response to what may be a really delicate situation.
It sounds like you're creating a board, like a board of directors.
Right.
inside of your head, and it's like, how did they get there? You ask these board of directors, some people showing up, it's like, I don't know you, right? It's like, where
Right.
did you come from? Would be a
Yeah,
question.
exactly. Yeah. So
So,
I love that.
um,
I love that you've spotted that because that's often a technique that I use in my sessions with individuals. So I invite them to think about a big campfire, a big circle or a round table, and invite parts who have a stake in the decision to come take a seat so we can hear what they want, what's motivating them, their experiences, their strategies, and really listen to what's been going on with them.
okay, but if you discover there's some board members that you don't like, say, you know what, your perspective, board member, isn't working for me. Can we kick board members off our board?
So we don't tend to do that because it's not possible to just get rid of who we are. However, I will say that I used to not like parts of myself. Now, I generalized that at the time before I knew what IFS was, and I thought I didn't like myself. But then I realized that those were just other parts of me who didn't like other parts of myself. Because when we come from a place of self-energy, which really is full of compassion and understanding, we may not like the strategy of different parts, but we can always appreciate their intention because they do have a good intention, but they may have experienced something painful that led them to have that negative strategy. So we listen to them, we seek to understand them. If there are parts who don't like them, and that can often be called a polarization, when two parts are butting up against each other, we create some space between them. And just as you would listen to two parties in a conflict, we listen to both of them and hear their perspective about what's not working with the other part. And then we try to bring more integrity, integration, and harmony between them. But they do tend to calm down. And often they aren't in these intractable positions where they're so committed to the strategy. Often they are willing to consider other things that work for more parts. Often because these strategies can be really exhausting and they recognize that it doesn't work for them.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like kind of what I do in somatic movement therapy is we do neuroscience-based repatterning.
Right.
I like the way your accent says that better than mine. Repatterning sounds so much better in your part of the world. But in this repatterning is when you say a reaction to a trigger, let's say, and that's a part of you that's reacting. And you put the space, in somatics, we do the same thing.
Okay.
You change the neural pathway, you create another pathway. And
Right.
it almost sounds like you're taking that board and maybe giving one, I mean, I'm guessing here, maybe giving one of your personalities or one of your leaders inside of you more of a voice. I mean, can you like kind of quieting this other one? Because maybe it came from a 3-year-old experience. You're not 3 years old anymore,
Exactly.
but and you're letting that adult speak. And then where does the outcome become part of the goal? Because what I hear is that you're moving away from reactionary, but where's it like, I want to be more successful in my entrepreneurial pursuits or my
Right.
job or my relationship with
Right.
my family, my child, my husband, my wife, whatever. I
Right.
put a lot in that, but I'm sure you'll pick through that to get to where I'm going.
Sure. So, yeah. So first of all, I just want to speak to the somatic part of it. Somatics is a really important part of IFS because parts often show up in the body. So it's a
Oh, yeah.
great way to look at what's going on. And then in terms of what's the end goal here, I think as therapists, we often bring this agenda to our clients. And we want them to do better in the world. We really want to change their behavior. And
Mm.
if we can put that agenda aside and really try to just listen to the parts that are going about, concerning an issue, what's going on, we can actually understand them a lot better. And then we're not imposing our solutions on them because the client obviously knows their system way better than anyone else. And when we
Mm-hmm.
listen to parts, and then when we go back and we can touch the exiles who carry the burdens of trauma and help them release it, these exiles are then free to live out their true characteristics. So if you take, for example, something like a person isn't as successful as they would like in their entrepreneurship. So, for example, they may be holding themselves back. They may have imposter syndrome. They may believe they're not very good enough, or they may not deserve what another part of them would really love for them in their lives. We
Yeah.
go back and we listen to those parts who carry those beliefs. And it may be that they experienced something when they're often in their childhood that gave them the belief that they didn't deserve to be loved, that there was something wrong with them. And if we can compassionately witness the experience of those exiles so that they feel understood, and this isn't about narrating the original experience, it's about being with that part so they feel held and they feel the compassionate presence of self-energy. Then we support them in releasing that burden. And then when they do that and they can bring in more positive qualities, like the ability to believe in themselves, having the strength and fortitude, bringing more creativity into their work, then they really do, they can live that out more in their working lives, in their entrepreneurship. So it's almost like these are the qualities of these parts anyway. They're playful, they're creative, they're joyful, but they're burdened, they're being stopped by these burdens of pain. And then once they're released, then there's almost an organic flow of what the person would like to achieve in their lives.
Okay. Define or describe what an exile is.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
And then I've got another question. Yeah.
exiles are parts of us who experience the original trauma. And for example, if a person was abused when they were young, that part of them experienced the abuse. And it's very painful to have experienced abuse, so we often lock them away. We don't want to face it. We forget the abuse. We suppress it. We try not to think about it. Now, parts don't go away, so that exile is still alive within us. And sometimes they may be activated, and then it can feel as though that experience is happening again. And then we have other parts of us whose job it is to make sure that that pain does not get reactivated. And we
Right.
call those parts protectors. And in
Okay.
IFS, there are two types of protectors, managers and firefighters. And managers are proactive. They do their utmost to just keep things going along smoothly so the pain of the exiles does not get reactivated. So, for example, a person might work out at the gym really excessively so that they never have to feel criticism or judgment that their body isn't perfect or they are not good enough. So that's what the managers do, sustain a level of, of keeping everything under control. And the firefighters are reactive. So once the pain has been reactivated, the pain of the exile, and that might be a situation where it reminds them of the original trauma, or sometimes it can almost seem unrelated logically, but there is a connection. The firefighter jumps into action and will do anything to quash and douse the flames of that pain. And often those behaviors might be quite negative to the overall system. We might have an explosion of anger. It might be that someone engages in binge drinking or substance abuse, anything to quash that pain. But they have good intentions because they're trying to protect the exile. But those strategies don't really work long term or for the overall system.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay, there was a lot there. In neurobiology, right? The way I've always explained to people how the brain creates reflexes, those reactions, those reaction versus response, right? And it's like putting your hand on a hot stove and you feel pain and you instantly say, ow. Same thing happens in thoughts when you fall in love for the first time and you're 12 years old, right? And you are in love. Let's say you're a boy and it's a girl and you're falling in love with this little girl and she's, real sweet to you and you go on the playground together, you do things together, and all of a sudden one day she's like, has nothing to do with you, right?
Right.
Typical 12-year-old. And then all of a sudden it's like the devastation and all that energy that you think that, well, I'm not lovable. What's wrong with me? You go there and just like the hot stove, that incident becomes like a hot stove. So it's like you make this inference, I'll never fall in love again. It
Right.
ends in pain.
Yeah.
And therefore, I guess the manager keeps him from falling in love, which feeds, in my understanding, feeds the I'm unlovable.
Right.
Right. So it's like
Right.
this cycle. And then, okay, so that's so, and I kind of just re explained what you just said, but I'm really curious about those two things. There's a cycle of bad relationships. Like you always get with the person that's going to eventually kick you out. It could be that little boy growing up.
Right.
And they always have hurtful relationships and they keep drawing in the wrong person, you know.
Right.
Then they think it's the person's fault and not them,
Right.
which I want you to address that. And then I have another question for you.
Okay.
Address.
So first of all, I do want to say that when people experience the original trauma, there is an alternative, which as parents is really important, which is just to be with your child in their negative experiences, give them empathy. And then once they're supported through even really difficult experiences, they can overcome it. So that's why I think as parents, our jobs are really important to just have
Yeah.
empathy for our
Thank
children.
you so much for showing us the light at the end of that tunnel. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's something we can do.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then in terms of these cycles, so yeah, we are a system. It's not just linear relationships of parts. We're a system of different parts all interconnected. So you do have an experience of one part, then feeding into another, and it really is about untangling the system within. And yeah, I think sometimes people do go into these cycles and repeated patterns. There's a theory that that the parts of us who experience the original abuse or trauma, they are trying to seek redemption. So for example, if they can be with someone who was like their emotionally unavailable father, then they have the opportunity to heal that.
All of it.
Except it
Right.
doesn't always happen. I mean, it's
No.
kind of rare. So, but that part is always striving, because if it can recreate the conditions, then it can actually get the healing. And then if in IFS instead, we witness the original neglect or pain and we help them heal it so that they can form a new pattern of behavior.
Okay. So in IMDR, right? That's the eye moving where you go to
All
that
right.
traumatic moment and you repattern by moving your eyes and then putting in a different tape loop
Right.
or a different tape. In somatics, we go and touch. In somatics, the way I do it is the trauma is very painful. And so we
Right.
actually get to feel the pain as we release it. It's like taking the valve off. It's like taking the manager and going, okay, you can take a break, manager. Go sit down for a minute. We're going to face this thing full on. And we're going to feel the original pain that's been stuck there for so many
Right.
years. And it's traumatic. I've seen a lot in my own studios. And then that release. And I love that you touched on that. I'm curious about in your model how you effect that release. And then the other side, because I want listeners to know that everything can have a healing side of it, and that whatever pain you have to go through in the middle of the release, that the other side is so much worth it. But it's
Right.
a mystery if you don't
Okay.
know. You've
Right.
always lived, right, in this managed pain.
Right.
Okay, go.
So first of all, re-experiencing the trauma can be too much for people, and protectors may not want us to go there. So we make sure we proceed with the permission of protectors, because there can be something called protector backlash, where you barge in there and you say, I want to heal the exile's pain, but you ignore the fact that the protector is saying, no, this isn't safe it could re-traumatize the person. So we only go at a pace that the protector agrees to, and we listen to all their concerns before we proceed. And then when we are with the exile, we may need to say to them, hey, can you unblend a little bit? Give me some space, like you spoke about earlier, and maybe even tone the intensity down so that it's manageable for me to witness it. And then we witness it. The most important thing is not the intensity of re-experiencing the trauma, So it's really important that the part feels witnessed and understood. It's the amount of self-energy that we bring into the space. So we
Yes.
encourage the client to really get in touch with their own self-energy. And of course, I bring in as much self-energy as I can into the room too. And then once they feel really witnessed and understood, and we keep checking in with them about that, we ask them how they want to release it. And Dick Schwartz outlined a very clear protocol of unburdening. We invite parts to release the pain to the 5 elements or in any other creative way that they might want. So they might throw it into a big bonfire. They might release it into the sky as fireworks. They might put it into paper lanterns and set them off down the river. And that visualization really helps for people to just imagine, have the exiles imagine just letting go of all of that pain. And then once they feel entirely clear, we invite in positive qualities and we say, what would you like more of in your life? Let's feel what that feels like in your body. What would that look like living out those qualities? And then when you talked about rewiring the system, rewiring the brain, we check in with parts regularly so that they don't slip back to that old space, so that we really consolidate them wherever they are now in our hearts, in a nature sanctuary or an imaginary place, but they're no longer stuck back in that traumatic scene. They're free to be with us in our essence.
So it sounds, I'm kind of getting why you have personified these parts of us, because I imagine that it keeps a nice boundary between the person and their experience and then the facilitator, you here being you this at this point, so that don't they don't take it in as like you telling them what. It's more they're generating for themselves, so it comes from them, even if it's a person A, person B, person C, instead of you the facilitator. So it keeps you actually, I would think, safe, so the shinola doesn't come back on you,
Huh.
and and that they feel more empowered, that they actually
Exactly.
came up with it, that they actually decided to release it, that that part of them
Right.
decided to release it. And I'm so
Right.
glad you told us kind of how, because I was like, how does your system put the space in there to
Right.
actually make the decision to release? I
Yeah.
love that. I do have this other question that's been burning in me.
Sure.
How can you apply, or can you apply this to addicts, to addiction behavior?
So yes,
Explain that.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really quite remarkable the results that people are getting when they're using this with addictive patterns. So first of all, addictive behaviors at the root of that, it's usually firefighters. It can be managers too. So, for example, a person might use alcohol in an addictive way. So they may drink quietly all day to keep the pain under control, or they may engage in binge drinking when the pain becomes out of control. So the protector who is engaging in that behavior is not actually the problem. They are just doing their best to manage a very volatile, traumatic, painful situation. So when we go in there and try to control the drinking or the other addictive behavior, we're asking the person to change their strategy when we haven't given them anything else to work with. So when the pain comes up, what do? So what we actually do is befriend the part who has that strategy. We say that we understand, or we try to understand, what led them to do that, who they're protecting. And ultimately, we would like access to the exile who is carrying the pain. Because if we can help heal that burden, then these protectors will no longer have to protect them in that way, and they can actually engage in other behaviors that may be more helpful. So often firefighters, the ones who, engage in the reactive behaviors, they may actually be great at bringing more spontaneity into our lives, but they're trapped in this role of keeping the pain under control when it does erupt. But then once you heal that pain, then they no longer need to engage in that behavior. So we're changing the behavior by going to the root of the problem.
Wow. Well, that in and of itself is very powerful, because addiction is powerful itself. But
Right.
explained in that way, of firefighters and managers, is fantastic. Who are the good people on your board? What do you call them?
Well, we have self energy. So
Okay.
you just, who you are at core. But really, there are no bad parts. So
Okay.
everyone's good, but they may be stuck in roles that don't work for them. They may carry pain that doesn't work for them. And then we also are just made up of many, many parts who just are working well and everything's functioning great. And they could be protectors too. Like, we need all of our parts. If you imagine an orchestra with self being the conductor, it doesn't work if there are no musical instruments. We need the diversity and just all the amazing gifts of all of our parts, but sometimes we need to redirect them. Now, some of my favorite sessions are actually when a client comes and says, I don't know why I didn't cancel this session. Everything is going really well for me. And what we do is we go into what is working for them and we really amplify just the sheer bliss. We celebrate what's going on for them. We ask parts how they got to this space. We ask parts what they want more of to amplify everything that they already have. And that can actually lead to, okay, this is brilliant. This area here needs some work. But it's not just about healing the negative. It's really
Mhm.
about celebrating the positive too and making more of that in our lives.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm sitting here, of course, any listener is going to be like thinking about all the parts in their psyche. And I was thinking about my little girl, my joyful little girl who loved to run
Right.
barefoot through the grass. And, sometimes she really needs to just play. And
Right.
I don't know, it's like I want to have a session with you just to figure out all the players. I just want to know. I want to know who's in there playing
Yeah.
around with.
I know. It's like we are so beautiful inside. And the most amazing thing you can do, whether it's in meditation, a nature walk, whatever, is just to listen and ask who's present. And sometimes I do think that therapy can be really dull and dismal. And this is actually one of the reasons I got trained as a laughter yoga leader, because I really wanted to just bring more laughter and playfulness, which is actually one of the qualities of self, into my sessions. It's sometimes a little challenging to do that, but I really wanted to amplify that this is part of it. It's about celebrating all the diversity, the playfulness within us, the multiple of inner children we have who really do love just running around. And how can we be with those parts more so that we can have more of that in our lives too?
Wow. Okay. So, all right. How did you get into this?
Okay, so I was actually seeing a therapist who knew about IFS, but he wasn't trained in it. So I kind of got a very shallow take on it, and it seemed a bit more like Gestalt therapy or parts work. There's overlap with lots of other therapeutic modalities. But then a few years ago, I went through a really horrendous divorce and custody case, and it nearly broke me. And then I started reading about IFS, and it just made so much sense in terms of how I had noticed who I'm made up of, because I've been meditating for years and I'd always noticed all these voices inside me and these different aspects of myself, but I didn't understand how to do anything with them other than just be aware of them. So this gave me some tangible tools to really listen to them, have relationships with them, and figure out how they're trying to help me and then direct them and heal them.
Wow. And so now I have a question because I get all kinds of downloads and I always thought that they were, from my higher self or higher beings. How do you know? I mean, it could be an aspect of me that's giving me these answers. Now I'm confused, Lizbeth. How do you know?
So I think sometimes we don't know. So my understanding of the IFS model is that it is the one that makes the most sense to me in terms of what's going on inside. But I do think that the inner system is so much more complex than we can understand right now. So I don't know if I can just definitively say, this is what this is and this is what this isn't. But I do. So I think we have to bring some humility to our exploration, that we don't always have the answers. But I do think that if parts of ourselves want something good for us, I think then they're benevolent and they're good. And if they want something bad for us and they're trying to hurt us, then we should look more closely at what's going on and not necessarily listen to their agenda. Try and figure out what's going on there. So, yeah.
So what do you call it? Laughing yoga? Laughable
Laughter
yoga?
yoga.
Laughter yoga. Okay, you
Yeah.
got to give me a snippet on that. That's just intriguing.
Okay, so I saw this on a TV show, and it looked so ridiculously awkward that a bunch of people just came together and started laughing. But I wanted to try it out because I'm open to new experiences, and it was so much easier than how it looked. So it's basically breathing and yoga exercises where you just breathe and then turn it into a belly laugh. And we don't laugh enough in our society. And we don't do enough of like the really deep belly laughter too. And there's an expression, we don't laugh because we're happy because we laugh. And that means sometimes just laughing unconditionally because we have no reason to, but just creating the conditions so that laughter can occur. And I have better days when I laugh more, you know, so it's just great for us on so many levels.
And this is a wonderful way for us to bring this incredible interview to a close, is on a laughter, upbeat moment. You have given us so much food for thought. I mean, really, and I feel like you've made it okay that we have these conflicting things in our head and that we can do something about them. And there's a reason for everybody in there to be there.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
thank you so much for making it like, okay, that we're not actually schizophrenic, that, these are different parts of us.
Yeah. It's so
And
normal that we're going to be conflicted. It really is. And it can be tricky and difficult to hold the polarization, but then if we just listen, I mean, you can imagine like two people leaning out on either side of a boat. If they don't want to move in because the boat might tip over. But if we can just listen to everyone, then we can come to a place of more harmony and balance.
ooh, that's a segue to my new book, which is all about communication.
Wow,
It's
that's
really
great.
all about the responsibility of how you communicate. So, well, thank you for
Good.
that segue, Elizabeth. How do people find you?
You can look for me at multiplemind.com.
Multiplemind.com.
Yeah.
And we can remember what that means now, because we can remember.
Yeah.
Thank
We
you.
have a multiple mind. So
We sure do. What's a little nugget that you'd like to leave us with today?
I would say if you can just check in with your parts in just tiny moments. For example, if you're washing up, as you're falling asleep, first thing in the morning, just say, hey, who's inside? I just want to get to know you better. Just that. That will just mean the world to your parts because you're showing them that you care about them and want to build a relationship with them.
Oh my. Well, this has been totally fun. Thank you so, so much for joining us today, and very, very rich food for thought.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Angel.
Thank you to Lizbeth DeSaw for really stimulating some incredible thought about all those voices in our heads. Thank you for listening. And I'm your host, Angel Howard, and I would love to get to know you better. So send me an email at angel@angelhoward.co. To book me for a speaking engagement, come over to my website, angelhoward.co, or dive deeper in your own journey of self-discovery and buy my book, Issues in Your Tissues, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Until next time.